What's up, my wizards? All 75,000 of you, as a matter of fact. Thanks for that. It's your boy Dev from Mtg. We like magic. I'm sure you know the entire shtick by now. But today, we're going to go over a deck that was easily the most popular budget deck all last season, but we're going to make it competitive this time, and it definitely has the chops nowadays. We're going to talk about Black-Green Explore. Not only was Budget Explorer like a fan favorite last season, but it was also low-key like my favorite budget deck of the entire season. So I was super excited to get back in the lab and really try to tune this deck for power with some of the new pieces from Rivals, because it got a lot from Rivals. But that said, some of the best, most critical pieces in the deck haven't changed. So I'm going to look at our OG important Explore cards first, starting with the 4 copies of Wild Growth Walker, 3 copies of Shadowed Caravel, and 4 copies of Winding Constrictor. The 3 kings, as far as this deck is concerned, these are all still our biggest payoffs for exploring. You know, we didn't get a whole lot of new payoffs in Rivals of Ixalan, but the set did make it way easier to actually explore, which makes these cards even better than they were the first time around. I do think that Winding Constrictor still has a place in this deck. I've seen some talk on some ends of the spectrum here, on some corners of the internet, about taking Winding Constrictor out of this deck now, but I think that's foolish, honestly. It still works with everything in the deck, save for some of the removal that we're playing, obviously. And it works well with Walker and Caravel still, pretty obviously, too. It's still one of the most important, like, turn 2 setup cards we can possibly have in the deck, so I just don't think there's any reason to cut Winding Constrictor. I did trim Shadowed Caravel down by 1 copy, you'll notice, but I didn't want to cut it all the way. This is another one I've heard people say, oh, we can cut this card now. But I think that you still want to play at least 2 copies. So I've gone with 3. I don't think 4 is necessary anymore, but it's still an important card in the deck because it's, well, again, one of our biggest payoffs. So all 3 of these are still like super important, vital pieces to the deck's game plan. But here's the problem. Hey, come back to me. There I am. All right, so here's the problem with all 3 of those cards. They're all setup cards, you know? They require other cards to actually make them good, and those cards have to resolve and everything, so the deck really needs some cards that are just good in a vacuum. You know, they're good on their own, they don't require setup, but maybe they reward our setup. Luckily, we've got some perfect cards that do exactly those things. We're going to play 4 copies of Merfolk Branchwalker and 4 copies of its big sister, Mama Luigi herself. Here's Jade Light Ranger, new from Rivals of Ixalan, wearing dim overalls, too. Well, by now, people have pretty much learned the lesson that Merfolk Branchwalker is an awesome magic card. You know, it's spiked like 500% since it first came out. Things like over $1 now. It's a really good card that's going to get you some form of value. You know, it's either a 2-mana 3/2 or it's a 2-mana 2/1 still on curve that draws you a land. There's just really no bad mode on it. And the same thing goes with Jade Light Ranger, just better. You know, like this thing's always going to get some value. Sometimes it's a 3-mana 4/3. Sometimes, you know, it's a 2/1 for 3 that draws you 2 cards. And then sometimes you'll split the difference there and have a 3/2 that draws you a card. All of those are good modes. Like I've seen people on Reddit say they don't like any of the potential modes for Ranger. That's crockery. That's ridiculous. That's bull hockey. Like every single mode that Ranger can end up giving you is great, especially in this deck where she just follows up like any turn 2 play really, really well. Like fittingly, if you go like turn 2 Walker into turn 3 Texas Ranger, things just go crazy, you know? You immediately get like a 3/5 Wild Growth Walker. You gain 6 life, plus whatever value Ranger gets for you. So it's just crazy. And like Winding Constrictor, by now everybody knows that it's possible to go turn 2 Snake into turn 3 Jade Light and get like a 6/5 Ranger on turn 3. So this just opens up some unbelievable turn 3 plays for us. We got to play it. And it's good when top deck too, you know? If you've got anything on the board set up, whether you've got, you know, a Walker, a Caravel, a Constrictor, any combination of those cards, and you top deck a Jade Light Ranger on turn 8, you're in business. So it's just good almost no matter when you get it. Jade Light's crazy. There's actually another really good 3-drop that this deck got out of Rivals of Ixalan, and that's Tomb Robber. Old Lara Croft over here is actually insane in this deck. Like, one of the things, and I've said this time and time again, one of the things that the Explorer deck really, really needed in the last season was a way to explore every turn. Even if it drew dead for the turn, if it draws a land or something, it needs a way to explore every turn so we can eke out as much value as possible from stuff like Walker and Caravel, you know. If you draw dead, you essentially can't do anything. in the Explorer deck on turn 5 or 6, But Tomb Robber changes all that. And usually, by the way, pro tip, you usually don't want to drop it until turn 4 or 5, or you have enough lands out to get some value out of it, even if they have removal for it. Because even if they can target it with removal, you can still get an Explorer or 2 out of it, and that means more counters on Walker, that means more life, more counters on Caravel and stuff, And you can also, at instant speed, put it out of the range of red removal that's targeting it too sometimes. There's a lot of cool stuff about this card. Being able to do it at instant speed means that you can explore during combat, which is pretty awesome, and you can explore at the end of your opponent's turn to help fix your next draw. There's a lot of cool stuff about Tomb Robber, and as a matter of fact, you can even pitch stuff into your graveyard with Robber to get out later with one of the Planeswalkers that we're playing. So Tomb Robber does kind of an awful lot in this deck. It ensures that we get an Explorer every single turn, and we can get value out of it even if it's about to be removed. Just Tomb Robber's a much better card than it looks like, and once it starts getting big, and even like 1 or 2 Explorers, where it gets a counter, we'll get it big if you've got a Winding Constrictor in play. Suddenly, you got like a 5/5 Menace with just 2 Explorers. That's kind of unbelievable. That said, I'm only going to play the 2 copies of Tomb Robber because this is actually like our worst on-curve 3-drop. We really don't want Tomb Robber on turn 3. We'd much rather draw it like a little bit later in the game, turn 5, turn 6, that's fine. It's a great mana sink later on, great way to fix our draws, blast through land pockets, stuff like that we don't need. But almost none of that really becomes relevant until the later turns, so we don't have to draw Tomb Robber until a little bit later, so I think that we can trim it down to 2 copies and be safe. Now, another ridiculous card for the Explorer deck that we got in Rivals is obviously Path of Discovery. We're going to play this, but there's actually a combo available to us in the Standard with Path, and that's Animation Module. I'm going to play 3 copies of the Path and just 2 copies of Animation Module. Now, this works an awful lot like the Metallic Mimic and Animation Module combo. Actually, almost exactly like it. If you play a creature when you have both of these cards out, that creature will explore. If it gets a +1/+1 counter, then you can pay 1 to get a servo, and then that servo will explore. If you kept the same card on top of your library, it too will get a +1/+1 counter. You pay another 1, you get another servo. So you can just fill your board with tokens really, really easily this way, depending on how much mana you have untapped. And the whole time you're getting these tokens, you're also getting procs on like Wild Growth Walker, Shadowed Caravel, and stuff. So those cards are triggering too. You're gaining all the life in the world. You're getting huge walkers. So things just go absolutely nuts if you have both of these cards out at the same time. But they're actually decent independent of one another in this deck. Even Animation Module, you don't need Path to make this a decent card, because whenever a creature explores, then bada bing, you get a trigger on Animation Module. And even if the creature doesn't get a +1/+1 counter when it explores, if you have a Wild Growth Walker or Caravel out, they will get a +1/+1 counter. So it's another trigger on Animation Module. It works fine, independent of Path, and Path works fine, independent of it, You'll essentially get creatures that double or even triple explore when they come into play in the case of Jadelight Ranger. And it gives you a little bit more value with your creatures that don't explore when they hit the battlefield, like Wild Growth Walker. You'll play a Wild Growth Walker, you'll explore, and it'll immediately become a 2/4 and gain you 3 life. But you might get another counter on it or draw a card too. So creatures that don't enter the battlefield and explore, we get value out of them with Path of Discovery. There's just so much to like about these 2 cards, independent of one another, but they're crazy when you put them together. Yet another new card from Rivals of Ixalan, this deck got all the help it needs, is Enter the Unknown, which I'm actually going to play a whole playset of. This is one of the biggest debates, actually the biggest debate, that I had with myself when putting this deck together. Do we want Enter the Unknown or not? Basically, is it worth a full slot? And when you take it out, you really start to miss it for a couple of reasons. Yeah, it doesn't look like the most powerful card in the world, but when you top deck it, it's kind of like a 1-mana do-over. Let me try that again. You've got another creature out 90% of the time. You can target with your Into the Unknown when you top deck it. So you're going to get some value for your 1 mana, and often it'll replace itself with a land. That's fantastic for your 1 mana. But the thing that you miss the most about Into the Unknown when you take it out is these crazy turn 3 plays that it allows us to make. It gives us some really explosive turn 3 possibilities. Like, for instance, usually, when you start the game with a Wild Growth Walker and a Winding Constrictor in your hand, that's kind of painful because you'll play one on turn 2, the other on turn 3. You haven't done anything at that point but set up. It's kind of terrible to get both in your opening hand. But if you get both in your opening hand, along with the Enter the Unknown, that's where things get super interesting. You go turn 2 Constrictor into turn 3 Wild Growth Walker, and you immediately play Enter the Unknown and get at least 2 counters on the Wild Growth Walker. It'll get a counter for exploring, because a creature explored. It'll get a counter from Wild Growth, or from Winding Constrictor. And then it might get 2 more counters just because it explored, you know? Either that or it'll draw you a land. It'll gain you 3 life. It's just like, that's a ridiculous turn 3 play. And by the way, it's possible to chain. That happens sometimes, not very often, but it can happen, where you'll go like turn 3, play a creature, enter the unknown, and then if you draw a land, you can drop that land and play another enter the unknown. That can lead to crazy stuff, like turn 3, if you got Winding Constrictor on turn 2. You can go turn 3, Merfolk Branchwalker, and it's possible, theoretically, to get it to 8 power on that turn through Enter the Unknown. It's absolutely ridiculous. The turn 3 plays that Enter the Unknown gives us, just completely unignorable. If we don't have this, the only turn 3 play that we really have that's powerful is Jadelight Ranger. With this, we can go 2-drop into 2-drop, leaving room for Enter the Unknown, and do some really jacked up, filthy stuff. We're not done yet. We're playing a few Planeswalkers in this deck. We're trying to be really competitive, and we're building the kind of board presence, especially if we can get the animation module going. You know, we're building the kind of board presence where we can easily protect a Walker in the late game if we need to. So with that in mind, we're going to play 2 copies of Liliana Death's Majesty and 1 copy of Vraska Relic Seeker. Now, there are lots of cool things about both of these Planeswalkers in this deck. Note, first of all, that they both make tokens. And if we have a Path of Discovery out, that gets ugly super quick, especially depending on what the rest of our board looks like. If we got a Wild Growth Walker out too, you need to watch out, son, because, like, we'll make a token, that token will explore, Wild Growth Walker will trigger, it'll get a counter, we'll gain 3 life, the token can get even bigger or draw us a card. It's just absolutely ridiculous that these things make tokens. Just making tokens is crazy enough, but Liliana allows us to like reanimate cards that we pitched to a Tomb Robber or cards that we just pitched to explore into our graveyard. We can then reanimate them. If they were able to get rid of our Wild Growth Walker or our Jadelight Ranger or something like that, we can just get immediate value out of Jadelight Ranger from the graveyard. That's a great play. And if we somehow get her to ultimate, which actually isn't too hard, we just win the game. You know, we got a huge board presence protecting Liliana. We just blow away the other half of the board and swing in for alpha. So she's good for that. And Vraska can do the exact same thing. If we get to her ultimate, we essentially win the game too if we can just get through with 1 creature. And Vraska can remove stuff and get us treasure and all that. Like, both of these are unbelievable. Obviously, we protect them well, and they lead to awesome end games. Where as long as we can, you know, get a decent board presence up, not get swung into too hard, then we can just crack down, bust that stalemate wide open, and just end the game with an ultimate quickly, because both of these ultimate relatively quickly. Just don't see any reason not to play these 2 Planeswalkers. They actually both work well with what this deck, you know, draws up. And finally, we got to play some removal. This isn't the most exciting thing in the world, but we got to play some removal, because, you know, trying to win games. So we're going to play 4 copies of Fatal Push and 2 copies of Vraska's Contempt, so we can cover both ends of the spectrum. You know, we're trying to get set up. We really don't want to just, like, get blown out by aggro. Again, turn 2 Snake and a turn 3 Walker is a little bit slow if we don't have Into the Unknown, but if we can cover that on turn 3 by going, like, you know, turn 3 Walker, hold up for Fatal Push, then that does an awful lot for our game plan. You know, it keeps us from getting blown out by small creatures. And it allows us to, you know, more easily and safely set up. So Fatal Push, some people are also calling for, you know, going down to 2 or 3 copies of this. I also think that's foolish. Fatal Push is just the best removal in the format. If the deck carries black, we should play a play set of it, as long as we're trying to be competitive. I think with Vraska's Contempt, you know, this just does so much against the most important targets in the format. You know, Hazaret, Rekindling Phoenix, the Scarab God. There's just a ton of, even, you know, Ronus is seeing a lot of play now in these green-red mid-range decks that are relatively popular at this point in the format. So it's just, Vraska's Contempt is too important not to carry in the main deck, and I'll even carry an extra copy in the sideboard, because there are things that can just fly right over our entire game plan and ruin our day, like Glorybringer, card we hate to see. So it's really important sometimes to have a card like this, especially with Godfrey's Gift running around. It's just, yes, play at least 2 main deck copies of Vraska's Contempt. It's one of the best removal pieces in the format by far. Here's the mana base right here. We're only playing 21 lands in the deck, pretty low, but again, Explore kind of allows us to cheat and get away with that, and we're playing Enter the Unknown, which again, I promise you, in every world does help lower the land count. Pay a green mana to draw land, that's fine. So, you know, it's just 1 green mana for sort of card draw. That drives down the land count. So we can get away with a fairly low land count here and be all right. I wouldn't suggest any less than this, but if you wanted to go 22, I wouldn't begrudge you. I just wouldn't know what to cut. And here's our sideboard right here. Green and black actually give us a whole lot of sideboard options. Duress and Lost Legacy are both in there against control because we really don't care for control. We especially don't like sweepers. We work really hard to maintain our board presence, so we're going to get those cards out of their hand with Lost Legacy and Duress, and we can get things like Approach of the Second Sun with Lost Legacy. Just pretty much ruin most of their game plan, like 9/10 of their game plan, so I want that option. And also against those same sweepers, we've got Heroic Intervention, which can be equally as important for surviving, big stuff like Fumigate. We've also got Deadeye Tracker in there. It's been resigned to the sideboard this time around, but it's still in the 75. It's really good against the occasional Godfarer's Gift list. You'll need it for that. Even though we don't care for sweepers against us, we do like one-sided sweepers, so we're going to play a few here. A couple copies of Golden Demise, and just a one-off Vona's Hunger for when you need that instead. But in the end, I feel like Golden Demise is the better choice. It can still kill a field full of Whirler Virtuoso tokens, or when we have Ascend, which isn't actually super hard to hit in this deck, especially, again, if you've got all the servos popping out from Animation Module. You can hit Ascend pretty quickly. And once you do have Ascend, Golden Demise can just blow away half the opponent's board, allow us to get in for alpha. Same thing with Vona's Hunger. If we have Ascend, we can just blow away literally half of the other side of the field and get through for lethal. And here are your power rankings. Final score of 65. That is a really good score for a green-black deck. I mean, we're kind of, sort of, a green-black snake deck. And ever since Attune got banned and Ramunap Ruins got banned, the format is a little bit more mid-range in nature. Things have slowed down at least a half step now. So decks with like ridiculous animation module combos that wait until turn 5 to go online are actually a little bit more playable in this format. And the green-black snake deck is way more playable in this format. Everyone's expecting it to see a lot more play. Again, come out of the woodwork like it has 2 or 3 times in its tenure in Standard and be a real deck again. And this is essentially a take on green-black snake with a lot of value. This deck, honestly, even if you're not doing stupid explore stuff, you can still go turn 2 snake into turn 3 Jade Light Ranger and have a great time just with that. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things I like the most about this new iteration of the deck is that it actually has super powerful turn 3 plays. Before, it was really hard to get this deck in the game before turn 4, and that's a little bit too slow, but we gained a step. Now that we can do things like, Walker into Jade Light, or Constrictor into Jade Light, or now we can go Walker or Constrictor into turn 3 2-drop Enter the Unknown. That is so much business on turn 3 that we didn't have yet. So this deck gained some pieces and it gained a step. I think this is a real contender now. Anyone who played Black Green Explorer, I constantly get emails and messages on Twitter and stuff, people saying, I still play Black Green Explorer. It still wins me games at F&M. So people who play that deck will tell you it's a serious deck a lot of the time. It just generates. It's probably the best snowball deck in all of Standard. If they let the deck snowball for 3 or 4 turns, they're done. And again, we gained a step in this iteration of the deck. And we got a lot more defensive. We actually get to play like marquee removal in this deck. We get to play a ridiculous card like Jade Light Ranger. This deck got way better this time around, and it was already a sensible choice to play. So try this thing out at F&M. I guarantee it'll win you some packs. The quote-unquote weak version won you some packs. This deck is way better than its previous iteration, so it's a lot of fun to play. And if you are interested in checking out this deck list without having to watch this whole video over again, I'd be flattered if you did. But if you wanted a much quicker way to consume this deck list, just click the first link in the description box down there. That'll take you over to TCG Player so you can look at the list on their site. They're the cheapest place. You can get this list online right now. Some sites like $250 to buy this list because Fatal Push and Vraska's Contempt, even Jade Light Ranger are just kind of out of control right now. So if you want this deck for the cheapest you can buy it, go over to my sponsor, TCG Player. Click the first link in the description. Anyway, pretty sure I'm tapped out for this one. Let me know how you felt about it down there in the comments. How do you build your Black-Green Explorer list? I know a lot of people are fuzzing around with this list right now because it actually looks really promising, and I'm telling you, it is really promising. This thing will steal games sometimes, and again, just the fact that it got mostly a whole step faster with a couple of its plays, I cannot pound into you how good Jade Light Ranger is. So give this thing a try. Let me know how you felt about it down there in the comments. You can also Join the strict click if you want to. Just hit the subscribe button and make sure you ring the bell for the notifications too. Like the video if you liked it. That'll put it in more recommended feeds. That helps the channel out free of charge. To you, you don't have to do much. But if you did want to help the channel out with your wallet, if you wanted to, you could throw me $1 a month. Whole $1 a month on Patreon. Helps me out tremendously. Like, you don't even understand how much that helps me. And for your services, I will let you know what deck we're doing 24 hours before we actually upload it to YouTube. That's good information to have. So do all that stuff, and I will catch you cats later. Thanks for 75,000 subscribers, my wizards. We got to get to 100K. I want that stupid play button more than you can possibly imagine. 75,000 is way more than I ever thought we'd even get when I started this channel, and that's all you guys. That means a ridiculous amount to me because I never expected it. But now we got to hit that next milestone, man. 100,000 is what I want. I want it so bad. So help me get there. Click subscribe if you haven't done it yet, and I'll catch you kids later. I'm Deb from SB Mtg. Thanks for watching, my wizards. No matter what you do, spread love and be kind.